There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, home of the modern whitetail hunter. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and today on the show, we are joined by Tyler Jones and Casey Smith of The Element to discuss hunting in the South, making a trip from the South to hunt in the Midwest, and how to kill public land bucks. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by First Light. And today, we've got a much-needed topic of discussion, something we don't talk about enough. I'm sorry to those of you who have been asking for this and that I've been not doing it as much as I know you want, but we are talking about hunting in the South. We're talking about hunting in Texas. We're talking about the differences between hunting in the South and heading north and going to places like the Midwest and elsewhere. And joining me to do that is Casey Smith and Tyler Jones. They run the Element podcast, the Element YouTube channel. They are a couple diehard public land bow hunters, and they're getting it done. They're traveling across the country, killing great bucks, doing it the DIY, every man's kind of way that any of you could possibly replicate. So they're the type of people I really love to chat with, and they've got a great perspective, especially because they're hunting a place that I haven't hunted before, Texas, but they're having success in places that I have as well. So I thought this would be really interesting to see what's different, what's the same, what can be applied to either or. I think there's a little bit of something for everyone here today. So I don't want to beat around the bush too much. I will just give you a couple heads ups, a couple reminders before we get into it. Hunting season is about to start. My season kicks off here in just a matter of days almost, which is insane. If you want to stay up to date with what's going on with my season or Tony Peterson's or anyone else, make sure you're following Wired to Hunt on social media. In particular on Instagram, you'll get to see the latest stories from my hunts, updates on what's happening. And then finally, make sure you're going over to the Wired Hunt website and signing up for our newsletter to get the weekly kind of note from me, to get all the latest content shared with you. If you go to the meateater.com/wired, WIRED, that's where you're going to find all of our articles. You'll have the opportunity to sign up for the newsletter there, and you'll be up to speed and be getting a lot of whitetail know-how to your inbox every week. So, without any further ado, I think you're going to enjoy this chat. I definitely did. Let's get into it with Casey Smith and Tyler Jones. All right, here with me on the line, I've got Tyler Jones and Casey Smith. Welcome to the show, guys.
Man, glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I appreciate you making the time for it. I know you got a busy schedule ahead of you. I'm sure you're just like me right now, which is running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to finalize last-minute projects and get stuff packed and start thinking, because I take off for my first hunt of the year on Friday, so 7 days from now, 6 days from now. Are you guys in a similar boat?
Yeah, dude.
Pretty much, yeah. I'll add to that we have been redialing archery equipment the last little bit, and yeah, same boat, just trying to get stuff ready for the first hunt of the year. Where are you headed?
Well, I'll tell you where I'm headed, but you got me terrified. I have to ask. When you say you're redialing archery equipment 7 days before the hunt, that sounds like the kind of thing that's making my stomach turn. What happened?
Well, it's just a situation with, having newer bows and trying to decide if we're going to use stuff we're older and you're comfortable with, or if the new stuff's going to work out and yada yada. It's really not the best advice, to tell you the truth of the matter, for people. But
basically, coronavirus has kind of crushed all different shipping and production and manufacturing and everything. So like, we just got bows that we thought we would get about May or June, and so and I guess just not knowing whether that was coming or not, I didn't ever get my old bow tuned up, which is a 10-year-old Matthews. So it's like, it needed some work, and I just never got it done. And now we're in this boat where we got bows, but
we're feeling good now.
Yeah.
It's the beautiful thing about archery equipment nowadays is most of it's pretty good. So, if you've had a history of shooting, then it's just about getting comfortable with the system, and that's what we do.
That's
what we
true.
love to do.
I always get stressed when I know that there's like a bow update coming, or I've got to change, and I always have this period of paranoia or manic terror when I know that I've got a new bow coming, and then the bow arrives, and I'm always like, oh no, is this gonna fit? Is this gonna feel right? Even if I shot it at the shop before, there's always this feeling like, oh, it's never gonna be quite as good as how used to I was with the old bow. And then, like what you just said, every time, like over the last, 10 years, when I've been kind of getting newer bows more often than I used to, I always am shocked by how quickly these things they tune fast. You get used to them fast. I think maybe it comes right down to the fact that all of the, relatively high-end bows now they're all just darn great. You really can't go wrong, I don't think, now. They're all, long ways from, maybe you're going to tell a difference from your 10-year-old bow to now, but they're all pretty good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
KC was saying yesterday, he was like, man, like as a producer in this consumer market we have, like you can't get away with anything that's not, doesn't function like really well, because consumers will just squash you on the internet in no time and you'll be out of business.
Yeah, exactly. Our dads grew up when like word of mouth was the only way that anything happened, and everybody just shot what their local bow shop provided, but now it's like, if you don't make a decent product, everybody knows. The word's going to be that quick.
Very, very true. Which is a good thing for us, I guess, the consumers, that everything out there is
Sure.
pretty darn functional. So I can't complain about that. But you asked where my first hunt is. I'm going to Idaho for a whitetail hunt soon. What about you guys?
Yeah, we're headed to Nebraska for whitetail as well. I guess it's any deer tag, but be pretty whitetail heavy, just because it's what we know, But I'm not going to turn down an opportunity on a stalk or a shot at a mule deer either. So
Nice.
Pretty excited. That's actually my first early, I guess you call it early season hunt. Like a September velvet hunt or whatever. It's my first time to do that. I usually go elk hunting this time of year, and then Tyler and I talked a lot about stuff and decided we'd go try to do like an adventure hunt, kind of more for deer instead. So that's kind of the plan.
That's awesome. What else is on the slate this year? You guys travel a lot. How many states? What are you hitting?
Let's see.
That's a great question.
One, two.
No, you probably know this, but as public land hunters, sometimes even states you're a little bit conservative about mentioning. But nah, not a big. I guess we have.
If you want to give me like code names for them or like abbreviations.
So Nebraska, we're going to Nebraska. We're going to SD,
South Dakota,
and then it'll be Texas, probably Illinois, Kansas, and maybe a couple other fill-ins.
Definitely one other. There might be like Oklahoma. Just kind of depends. Like you probably know this, but like once November comes, anything can happen, and it just like it's the same thing for your travel plans. Like at any time, it can change.
Yeah. Well, y'all kind of are in a similar situation over the past few years, at least, where like Tyler, this was your 2020 season. Mark, I think it was 19 when you shot the big buck. But like, there's sometimes a deer can come into your life and just like wreck your plans completely in a good way. You know, you're just like, okay, everything is on hold until something happens here.
Yeah.
And it's great to have the flexibility to be able to do that. That's really nice. I missed that a little bit because since starting to film stuff like this, I was filming the Back 40 the last couple of years, and now this year we're filming some new stuff. We have to have like stuff locked in, like because we're scheduling cameramen and all that kind of stuff. It's totally thrown out my ability to ad hoc and to improvise. So I feel like I now have my hands tied in this. I can't complain about it because I get to do cool stuff, but I'm going to complain about it right now, I guess, and say that I miss your flexibility.
Yeah, what else is podcasting except just complaining for an hour? Right? That's what we do.
That's true. I'm glad I don't have the only podcast like that. Oh man. So a heck of a slate for you guys, and it's perfect to hear that, to know what you guys have coming down the pipeline, because a lot of what I was hoping to talk about today was about how you do this, how you balance these trips. I've done a lot of this traveling hunting just like you guys. A lot of other people are starting to do that kind of stuff too, but it seems like everyone has their own little thing, their own little style, their own little, I don't know, method to the madness. So it's interesting to me, no matter how many people I talk to that travel and hunt new places and hunt public land. I always love to see into their minds that are always unique from mine. But you guys are much more unique than most of the people I've talked to because of one really big thing. The big thing is that, and this is crazy, like when I sat down and was thinking about this, I can't believe it's true. And I'm going to get murdered for this being true once people realize it's the case.
Oh, what's happening?
I don't think I have ever, not once, had somebody from Texas on the Wired Hunt podcast.
Oh, what in the world?
Dang,
how about that?
That's why you
man?
went for a twofer right now, isn't it?
Yeah, I had to correct this. I had to correct it in a big way. So,
yeah.
Unless, I mean, other than the Rut Fresh stuff, but I mean, like for a main episode, for a main real Wired Hunt episode, I've never had a Texas deer hunter on here, unless there's someone I can't think of that's just blanking. I'm getting old and I've got kids, so it's possible I've forgotten stuff.
Yes, very possible. No, but we're honored, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely,
awesome.
Man. You need some Southern accents on here.
I know it. You are not the first person to tell me that. They're sick of hearing my stupid Michigan accent and talking about all the weird things we do up here. So,
oh man, it's fun. I love it. My mom is from Minnesota, so like,
nice.
you're speaking my language. I just don't speak it back to you.
Well, I'm glad you understand at least.
That's right.
So okay. With that being the case, like we have to at least spend. I got to get a Texan's perspective on Texas deer hunting before we go any further.
Yeah.
So, as Texans yourselves living down there, what do you think about Texas deer hunting culture? What do you think about how it's perceived, about the stuff you see going around you? Is what I think Texas deer hunting culture what it actually is?
So of course, that's a pretty subjective question.
You're a very knowledgeable guy, so you may not quite think what others perceive. Probably.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that if you don't know much about Texas hunting, the cliches you have heard definitely exist. Like there definitely are parts of Texas that are, it's high fence ranches and big buck contests and corn in the middle of two tracks from big tower blinds, and like that culture in itself. I'm not going to go down the high fence road too far because I have a lot to say about that. But, just the culture of the South Texas.
You can't tease stuff like that and expect me not to press you on it.
I'll just say this. It's all a pin. I don't care how big it is. It's a pin. That's what I think about it. But, yeah, not a big fan. But
that's a pen for Michigan people.
Yeah, pen. Sorry.
Thanks for translating. Let's keep that going.
Yeah. It's not the same thing as dropping a pen. But as far as just like that style of hunt, of course, Texas has a very generous rifle season, and a ton of private land, and a lot of culture and history behind going to what we call the deer lease, which y'all may have like a similar concept of like deer camp. It's kind of the same kind of thing where you all head down after watching college football or whatever, and go sit out and hunt over bait and see what comes in. And it's that's how I started out. It's how I grew up. I didn't do any high fence hunting. And I think Tyler you probably did a lot of the same stuff, right?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, the deer lease, what we called it all the time for my family as well. And we just, you leave out on a Friday and drive west through the Metroplex, and go usually stay in a hotel. So that's the kind of the difference, I guess, in like a deer camp.
Yeah.
A lot of times there's not like a camp on the place or whatever. But yeah, that's kind of like, I'm actually, Casey and I were talking about this. We were at the bow shop yesterday as we talked about getting our bows worked on, and the kind of some of the cliches that you hear about big bucks and stuff like that. We were all kind of at home talking amongst each other about these things. And like, I didn't feel like I like some of the different cultural ideologies that we have. But there are different little niches where you've got certain guys that think a lot, have no problem with high fences. And then there's some guys that are kind of indifferent. And then there's some guys that, absolutely can't stand them. And so, I think that, I don't know for sure what the perspective is outside of the state. I do think that we get kind of a pompous, we have like, people think we have a pompous air about us, I guess, sometimes. Being from Texas, we're bigger and better and that kind of thing,
Dallas Cowboys, man.
Dallas Cowboys.
That's how it goes.
Is there that much to brag about there?
Yeah, no, not down there.
No, sir. But anyway, it's just, I think that, like sometimes when we got a state, me and KC at least, we try to kind of like lay low at a Colorado trailhead because we feel like everybody up there hates Texans because they come and hunt OTC elk, or whatever. So we have to kind of think about that sometimes when we're out and about. But
I think hunting culture-wise, though, it's like maybe this could compare for you specifically, and other people might have a similar idea. Texas is a huge state geographically, right? So I know Michigan is pretty spread out. We were there a couple weeks ago. It's a cool place. But we were in southern Michigan, and it's completely different than the UP.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine Texas like that, but like in seven different directions, So what people think about is the cliche Texas type hunt is pretty regional. It's probably a, what do you say, 200 by 200 square mile area, something like that, which sounds like a huge chunk of land, and it is. But like, you also have all these different subsets, I guess you would say biomes or whatever they might be, of just different hunting cultures. Where we live, we're kind of right on the edge of kind of more of a agrarian, like what you might think of as Kansas, Oklahoma type stuff, where there is some, beans and corn and things like that kind of north of us. And then kind of where we are exactly is the transition into like more of deep south type stuff with pines and oaks and stuff like that. So much more still, a lot of gun hunting that goes on, but close quarters, long sits without seeing any deer, stuff like that. And that's kind of how we grew up hunting, at least closer to home. Like the deer lease thing was almost like vacation, or it really was the vacation that we had.
Now, what about deer behavior, deer numbers, deer quality, all that? Now, understanding that, like you just said, very regional. This might be different, obviously different in different parts of the state.
Yeah,
but if you had to give me a Texas deer 101, can you give me like how? And I guess what I'm going to ask you is here, because we need a reference point. Tell me how Texas deer are different compared to like the Midwestern states you've been to, that I've also been to, and that a lot of people listening have. What's that? How does that differ? Because I know there's differences there. What stands out to you?
Tiny bodies.
Tiny bodies is probably the first thing I was going to say too.
Yeah. So Tyler actually killed a giant, possibly once in a lifetime deer off of his property here last year, which none of y'all need to know where that's at. But he for sure is just a beautiful specimen, right? But you walk up on him and it's just body wise, maybe 2/3 of what you might see in most of your Midwestern states. Like, what do you think that deer weighed on the hook?
Man, 175 pounds or something like that, maybe.
Like that.
Just a completely different, not to make anybody mad here, but subspecies, I guess, of deer.
Here we go.
So, I mean, even like skinning them out, like, the hair was so much shorter and thinner, and the skin was so much thinner, because they just don't have to, like we still get a lot of Gulf air here, so we have a pretty moderate winter, and we can almost grow citrus trees here,
Until Snowmageddon happens.
Yeah. So, but like if I was to think about trying to explain this to people who haven't been to Texas and deer hunted, I would think as our region, and maybe like also like the deep East Texas stuff, as being kind of a similar region with smaller bodied deer, some kind of like darker hair characteristic traits. A lot of the rut is going to be like probably smack dab in the middle of November, like around the 14th. We've seen really good trail camera data around the 14th of November. So obviously, like that's when the chasing period is happening the most pronounced, I guess. And then you could go down to the Gulf, where KC spent some time on the coast, and what would they were running in like August and September down there.
August and September they would rut before even deer season started, and that was always the local thing. Was like, well, we don't even get to hunt them in the rut.
Well, that's a weird thing too, is because like they manage our state kind of. They try to do like some regions, but it's not really as micro-regional or micro-regionally managed as it should be, probably. But I mean, you've got that happening on like in the South Texas Gulf Coast area, and then over to the west is all the brush country, which is mesquites and senderos and stuff like that. And that's where the big money is, and the big ranches. Lots of high fence places down there, still low fence places too. And you've got a mid-December rut, kind of early to mid-December is when you see the most chasing and stuff like that. And then you've got the Trans-Pecos region way out west. If you look at kind of that western little pointy thing where the Rio meets, that's all going to be a lot more arid and mountainous, and really more mule deer than anything. Carmen Mountain whitetail, right over there. Some of that.
There. I mean, I've spent some time out there, and there are whitetails like all the way out, but it's just I don't know. It's almost inaccessible because so many large land tracts,
Right. That's. I mean, it's so privatized out there. You're talking about like Jeff Bezos is the guy, one of the owners of land out there. So like, then you got the Panhandle region, which is a little more of that kind of Midwest feeling, a little bit bigger body deer overall, little lower numbers throughout, and still very privatized.
So this is stuff you know more about, but the lower Rio Grande Valley stuff down there. That's like, or not lower, but Rio Grande Valley, you have the Golden Triangle where it's an anomaly of deer body size.
Yeah. So that brush country I was talking about is typically the deer there are a bigger body size as well than most of the rest of the state. And I don't know why that is necessarily, because
it's gotta be just good forage. And
they say mesquite beans are actually a high source of protein. I don't know, but those are kind of some of the regions. Then we've got like North Texas, what's considered kind of North Texas, which is like DFW region and all that surrounding, and out west a little ways to the Panhandle. And that's still pretty mesquite heavy. I think those mesquites actually came up with the cattle drives from like Mexico and Central America. That's one of the things
that's kind of cool living around here, is that like when you see mesquite, like we have a couple patches locally, it's because those cattle were driven up from like that brush country stuff way down south, and then defecated and spread seeds up here. So it's kind of it's just a cool legacy type thing.
And then right in the middle is the hill country. We call it hill country. A lot of people up in like your area would probably laugh at us because they're not, it's just hillier than everything else. But it's a lot of limestone and stuff like that. Real pretty country. It's actually really high dollar real estate. A lot of it.
Wine country.
And there is some public land down there. A lot of it's on a draw. And those deer are very small bodied overall, and very plentiful.
It's wild, man. Like, you're talking, I think you're kind of alluding to like, you were talking some about like, body characteristics and stuff like that. And of course, we went straight to body size, but antlers are what kind of makes this thing go round. It's so weird how it's been stigmatized when you talk about trophies and things like that, just because of, how just in the public everything we do is now, right? So you have to just kind of be careful about the way you describe things, but it also makes you take a little extra effort to explain your reasoning on stuff. But anyways, for antler size and stuff like that, I feel like most people down here are just doing their best to shoot something that's, in the 125 and ups type thing. It's just anytime you see a deer around here that's going to score super high, it's because it has like a 140s to 150s type frame and a bunch of junk. That's what is going to usually happen. We just don't have the genetics, at least in our area, to have those, 70s and 80s top deer. But it happens every once in a while. So there's always these old stories, and you might know the other end of it. But like you go to taxidermist or something, there'll be an old guy there, and he's like, "Oh, that's one of them deer that's got some of that Michigan blood in them." Back in the 80s, they brought them Michigan deer down here. Yeah. So they love to talk about that, man. They love it. And I don't know how many deer y'all had to give away, but it must have been millions, according to these old timers.
I'm glad that a few of them made it to you.
Me too.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
What about behavior? I mean, if I'm thinking about the assumptions I have of Texas, I've never hunted there. I have spent a little bit of time there. I've got family that live down there, so I've visited. And so I've seen some of the critters running around. If I had to make an assumption about Texas deer, my assumption from 2,000 miles away is that there's a lot of them. They are kind of dumb. They come into the corn feeder and just feed like birds, blah, 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 on those things that you see. And then secondly, they react to rattling more than anywhere else. That's another thing that I feel like stands out that I've heard. I don't know if that's a myth or not, but if we're going to pull at these assumptions, I'd say, rattling works like crazy in Texas. Tell me, is any of that actually true? And then number two, having the experience you guys have of Midwest and Texas, how do you actually see things being different from a behavior standpoint and how they operate and all that stuff?
It's wild because I hate to go back to this, but it's so regional because we have such a large state. I would say that what we hunt on a normal basis, which is kind of the eastern half of the state, none of those things that you mentioned would be true here. Mm-hmm. But what we have here looks nothing like what you might get a chance to see on TV, because everybody does go where it's probably a little easier to do. Yeah. Like for instance, where we live, a lot of, suburban lot type areas and neighborhoods and stuff, but even the larger tracts, you're talking about 40, 50 acres, stuff like that, which it's probably kind of similar to, kind of where you're from. Whereas out west, in the western half of our state, 2,000 acres is a small place. So what ends up happening where we live is, since it's, bait is legal here, every 20 acre property has a corn feeder. So it's kind of one of those situations where if everyone's on the same plane, you're on the same plane. If you have a corn feeder in the middle of 2,000 acres, you can bring some deer in, but if you have 20 corn feeders on 2,000 acres, you can't bring in very many deer, So I think we've talked about this at length on our show before, but corn is kind of a weird deal because it can make some things good. It can make situations calmer. Tyler talks about this a lot. Like if you can get a deer where they're feeding, they're usually very comfortable. So a lot of times you can make very ethical, good, clean shots. However, deer seem to recognize that they are being fed a lot of times, so maybe on a place like you see like on TV where, it's fairly low pressure, large tract of land, they come into the feeder like you're saying. And a lot of times, honestly, does around here do that, but it's weird how bucks have a different mentality about things.
Yeah. We feel like around here, as far as feeding goes, we hand feed for, like if you put up a feeder that throws automatically, twice a day or something like that, which a lot of guys do, it's a lot easier on you, but you just don't see big bucks show up to those very often. So a lot of times what guys will do that are in the know they'll just throw out a couple bags of corn and, put a trail camera over it. If there's a big deer in the area, then they'll just try to keep some corn there for a while. A lot of times,
and then the pigs come in and eat it all.
Yeah,
you don't have to
that's another issue. We do bad.
And I'd say this too is that this is all private land discussion. Tyler and I hunt probably 75% public land, maybe more here in Texas, and on that baiting is out. So you have to pretty much actually hunt deer.
But as far as like behaviors go, and rattling and stuff, we hardly do it up here where we're from. Not that it hasn't worked for us before, but it's just it's such. What I like to tell people is where you're seeing the TV shows down in the brush country. I can drive there, or I can drive into Illinois. You know what I mean? Like it's the same amount of time in different directions. So it's to say it's a different region. It's basically a different country almost. It's Mexico. You know what I mean? It's completely different.
That's really eye-opening to think of it that way. So then my next question is, so why do you go to Illinois instead of going to the other part of Texas? Like why leave the Texas, the glory land, the Lone Star State?
And so that's a good point, because we do have we have a tag. Our tags are here, and it's a resident fee and everything. So, but the reason is, I don't know. I looked this stat up years ago. I'm not sure how it ranks, but I'm sure it's very accurate still for the most part. But Texas, when I looked this stat up, was the 9th largest. Essentially, if you were to look at all the countries in the world and their economies, we would be the 9th largest country in the world as the state of Texas.
I believe I looked at it the other day. We've lost a spot.
Okay,
so we are now the 10th.
So we're
in
your top 10.
But
the point is, like, that money that comes out of Dallas and Austin and Houston and San Antonio and all the oil and stuff like that out west and on the coast, that money translates into corporate leases, which if you're talking about the best hunting in the state down there, where I'm talking about in South Texas, you're talking. Those are places that people have to die before you get a chance to hunt, because there are these, some of these places are, Jerry Jones is the guy that, and his kids and grandkids get to hunt or something, and they go once a year or whatever. But that's the kind of money that we're dealing with. And just not everybody's as high profile, but they have lots of money. And so, and then there's these big businesses that have corporate leases that, they get to, send 20 or 30 dudes out and they'll hunt it, throughout the year, and they coordinate all that through email and whatever else.
You compare that with, a out of state OTC tag that's, top end $700, very top end.
Illinois is less than $500 bucks, so
compare that to, what it would take to get on they do it by gun down there, and you do, usually season leases and by gun is, $3,500 is probably a steal nowadays, on a spot. And you pair all that with the concept of, to do all this within your state, you have to find private land to do it on, because, last I checked, we're like 2.3% public land access, like accessible to hunting. I think there's 4% in the state, and then of those, that 2.3, if you want to really get down and look at what you can actually go out and whitetail hunt with archery or gun equipment, it's real low.
Without drawing.
Yeah, without drawing. Yeah.
And the draw system is, pretty stacked.
Whereas you head to, say, a state in the Midwest that's over the counter, you got your, $400 to $700 tag, or I guess, $500 tag. And then you've got all this public property that you can go out and shoot giants on, So you start doing a little math, and it's maybe I should go do that instead.
Yeah. So you guys do still stick around a little bit and do that public land thing in Texas, which does seem hard to do given there's so little of it, but a lot of people probably that are interested. I mean, I know there's a ton of hunters in Texas. What are you doing different down there to actually make that work sometimes?
We've one thing that I would say that helps us to kind of, separate or whatever, just to try to be more efficient is identifying plant life. We do a lot of, we're both kind of nerds about gardens and stuff like that. So we can just walk through the woods and pretty much know, all the trees, especially here, that we're seeing and what they do, what they produce, how big the acorn is, when the hogs or deer like to eat it, how long it's got to sit on the ground.
What was that? What's this thing? Acorn? What?
Acorns,
right,
acorns. Yeah. So, there's different times a year that those tannins break down. Even if they've been on the ground for a while, deer won't mess with them until December or something. So we kind of do a lot of that. And then there's other times of the year outside of hunting that help us to hang trail cameras, preseason or whatever, to learn what deer are doing based off of what they're eating, whether that's common ragweed or cedar elm buds or whatever it might be. So that's one thing I think we use a lot to our advantage. And then, honestly, we've done this kind of digital map scouting series we've done the last few years with OnX that's really just been almost like a practice session for us all summer. And so I think that's tremendously helped us to be able to read maps.
Yeah, you pair that. Just go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you're looking and you're e-scouting in the places you hunt in Texas, are you looking for anything? I'm assuming, now I know you've already kind of told me that each of these regions could be so different than the other, but I got to believe that e-scouting Illinois looks a lot different than e-scouting Texas, no matter what part of the state. Is there anything unique, like from a step one e-scouting standpoint, that you're thinking, man, there's this kind of feature that's really pretty unique to this area that you never would see in Illinois or Kansas or Michigan, but here I know that these kind of brushy patches, and by the way, you might hear a chainsaw in the background. Sorry about that, guys. We had a big tree come down, and the guys that are helping with a little bit of this stuff just showed up. But anyways, is there anything unique that stands out to you that's special down where you're at versus other places?
As far as map scouting goes, I think it's more the way that we read our terrain some. And I don't think it's unique to specifically where we're at, but it might be more of a southern deer hunter versus northern deer hunter type thing. We have to hunt deer a lot of times that aren't moving to heavy bed to feed type things, because where most of these public properties are that we hunt, they are old Corps of Engineer properties or WMAs or whatever it might be, that's just in low-lying areas that aren't good for any type of agriculture. And if there is close agriculture, usually it's hay, which down here is coastal Bermuda, which deer do not even care about, So a lot of times we're hunting deer that are on more natural movement patterns. So we're trying to find things that funnel movement, and that's probably pretty broad across the spectrum, no matter what state you're in. But I think that what we end up hunting a lot are these creek bottom, river bottom type areas. Okay. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, I guess there's two things that I would think about. There's something that we really like to key on, we call creek horns. I don't know, they might be called something, somewhere else, but it's essentially a big bend in a riparian system, right? So some people might call it a peninsula,
oxbow,
yeah, something like that. But just something that's going to take whatever deer we're moving in large set area and make them have to kind of pinch down to go around the corner of that creek or river or whatever it may be. We look for that a lot because a lot of times on these WMAs and stuff, there's enough hunters around that if you see a good looking pinch on the aerial, there's going to be a stand or two there already.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to find the stuff that's kind of unique to that situation.
Yeah. We also use like secondary creek crossings a lot too. So because the creek system generally is a highway for deer, they're going to move up and down this creek system a lot of times. And then they have to cross these secondary creeks that feed in, these feeder creeks. And there are very specific points that they cross on these things sometimes. So if you can find that, it takes boot scouting to find that for sure a lot of times, but that's a starting point. And
you can usually find the secondary creek on you actually using like the terrain topo lines and stuff, and then you can walk that thing up and down and kind of find those secondary crossings or whatever. And that's pretty good for rut and even pre-rut stuff. But we also kind of have a technique that I think is pretty unique for later season down here. All these properties get a ton of pressure, as a lot of places do in the country. And by mid-December, deer actually end up habitating in places that you wouldn't expect them to. And we have these areas on these river bottoms that are mostly like floodplain, and it'll be ash trees with like hardly any vegetation on the forest floor. And it's because it's underwater, 3 or 4 months out of the year. And it's extremely difficult to hunt because all these trees are 5-6 inches in diameter, and it's very monotonous, and it's real hard to pattern deer. And those deer just know that people don't like to go into that kind of stuff and hunt because it's almost impossible to A, pick a spot that you think you'll be within 30 yards of a deer, and also B, find a tree that's big enough to hang a saddle or a tree stand in. So I think that's one of the things that's really kind of helped us with success in the past is kind of identifying those places that hunters don't want to go.
That's an interesting point. Another opposite example, but it's something that's a little bit unique to what I see. So there's finding these places that hunters wouldn't want to go. But then I also know you guys have had some success on the native vegetation that you mentioned where people would probably see it and think, ooh, I should go here. So what about like persimmon thickets or something? I've seen you guys take advantage of that. And that's something that I never run into up here. But I know you're seeing down there. Talk to me a little about
that. So persimmons are going to be a early season food source most of the time. You'll find some. Tyler actually has one here that's a late dropper, which is gold if you can find one. And it's actually kind of nice to hang a camera on one of those for seasonal data, even if you're not going to go back just to see when they drop. But if you don't know what a persimmon is, it's I can't remember the scientific name, but they're an orange fruit that are about the size of a golf ball. They'll be green in the summer and they'll start to ripen towards the fall. And deer, possums, hogs, raccoons, everything just love them. And if you taste one that's ripe, they are actually delicious. But a lot of times us as humans, we can taste the tannins in them and they don't taste very good. But animals are a little bit less sensitive to that. So we've just found, especially if you can find some later droppers that are kind of pre-rut or even in early November, that, man, everything is in there. And what happens is it kind of creates like a little hub of deer activity. It's not just a food source, but this is something you see in food sources across the board, right? Like there's food source staging where, they want to go in there and eat the persimmons or eat the beans, eat the corn, whatever it might be. But they don't feel quite comfortable, or they know they can be in this certain area, and it just ends up being an area like a social hub, right? And we see that around persimmons a lot. There'll be scrapes and rubs and just does and bucks. Like last year, we have antler restrictions where we live, so they have to be a certain width to be able to shoot. And we had a buck come in that was kind of right there bordering, and we decided to not. In retrospect, it was maybe not a great decision, but it was the right one in the moment. I kind of have a little bit of
better safe than sorry.
What's that?
Better safe than sorry.
That's right, man. You don't want to do anything illegal, but so it was really cool because we actually got to just observe. I don't know. We had no wind, so we kind of had like a rising thermal situation or something. It was really weird. But the deer pretty much went all around us and never smelled us, and just got to see him come in and we jokingly like to say rut around. He rutted around us a good bit, but he was, making scrapes, rubbing on trees and smelling around. And then another younger buck came in from a different direction, and he like walked over there and did a very interesting, quiet but prominent snort wheeze. I don't know if you've heard that before, but in the Midwest, I hear him just, just blow the wood out. It was almost like he knew he was a 3-year-old, so he didn't want to do too much, but he wanted to let this 1-year-old know who was the boss of the immediate area, But it was just kind of cool to just see, that interaction and how much can happen around a quality native natural food source like that.
Yeah, and to kind of relate that back to like e-scouting stuff, one way to find those, and you have to pair this up with like putting your eyes on a lot of this stuff. That's how you become better at finding it on the map without having to go find it with your boots or whatever. But like basically, on a lot of the stuff we hunt, these persimmons will grow in low-lying areas and a lot of times in open areas. So if you've had a place that's been cleared by the state, a lot of times they're clearing cedars and burning them and stuff. And so they'll have these kind of little fields and stuff made that are kind of going fallow. And you can find them. They're usually growing in thickets. They don't grow by themselves very often. They grow in thickets. So you can start to find those. If you find them with your eyes as well, then you can relate that to almost any map you look at.
So as you're saying this, something popped in my mind, and it kind of takes in another direction, but I got to wrap my head around this. Do you guys, do Texas hunters identify as like being southern deer hunters, or do you feel like you're in a totally different category? So what I mean by that is, do you and a deer hunter from Alabama and a deer hunter from Georgia be like, oh man, those guys up in the Midwest are always talking about this stuff. It doesn't relate to us, but we all get each other. Do you have that, or do you find yourself like on a different island from other people down in the South and Southeast?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. We are just pretty much in the South and the Southwest, like where we're at. It's crazy, but like Fort Worth and all that is like huge steakhouse country, cattle drives. We got stockyards in Fort Worth, like big stockyards, and so like we actually live, as far as food goes, we live in a pretty awesome place.
Killer Cajun food, killer Mexican food, killer steaks, it's just,
we got the Gulf, got shrimp, seafood. Yeah,
right.
it's like a good place, but we also are kind of like a mutt in that sense where we don't really completely relate to anybody. We kind of have this Southwestern vibe a little bit, and it's a little bit different where we're at directly, at least, because we're not thick, heavy pines. So it's a lot different than like Alabama or something like that, maybe.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like you have guys that'll be like, oh, pro football's the best. And then somebody else will be like, college football's the best. But then you get those college football guys to the side and they're like, War Eagle versus, Roll Tide. You know what I mean? So like, I'm sure there's some guys who would go back and forth about if South Texas or East Texas is better hunting, but overall we're all united in, dogging on the Midwesterners,
Well,
I think it's fun, man. I don't know. I would say that kind of going back to one of the first things you said, I guess as far as culture goes, I don't know if I feel personally a whole lot of like that Texas pride or whatever when it comes to hunting here versus somewhere else, and that's kind of why we travel around, man. I just love deer. I love going and seeing new places and hunting deer in new spots, and it's cool to go to the Midwest and experience that. And like Tyler drew Iowa in 19, right? And like to go up there and just see everything that you've heard Bill Winke talk about your whole life about like how specific days matter and what happens, on this day versus this day. It's neat.
Yeah.
So important question then. Which is better, pro football or college football?
I can answer you straight up, college.
Yeah, all right. We can continue. That was the correct answer.
Yeah, but you're kind of in the same boat as us, though. Like you don't have a lot to brag about with the lines, so it's like, definitely college, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We've had many better years on the college side. What do you think about UT and Oklahoma going to the SEC?
Oh man, it was.
We can make
bound
this
to happen.
a 30-second segment.
So I went to A&M, Texas A&M, which you may know of. So
Yes.
For me, I'm like, those followers,
Yeah.
But I a little part of me, I'm not going to tell all my A&M friends, right? But a little part of me is kind of excited to get to play those games again.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be very interesting. Okay, so that out of the way, and go green, Michigan State University.
Sparty.
What about this? Do you view? Is it easy when you come up to the Midwest? When you go up to Kansas or Nebraska or Illinois, do you view that as this is a piece of cake compared to back home, or do you go up there knowing this is going to be a big challenge, just a different kind of thing? And tell me that for you individually, but also I'd be curious if you have a sense of like what the general sense is from your friends or other people you know in the South when they come up. How do they view this?
I think that aspects of the Midwest are a little easier, and I think a lot of times that's just related to deer densities. And because of where we live, we don't have a high deer density. Now, parts of the state are different than that. But outside of that, man, whitetail or whitetail. I don't think that like a Michigan buck is any smarter than, put them on the same plane, right? Like a 5-year-old Michigan buck and a 5-year-old Iowa buck. They're probably both really keen because God made them that way, right? They are made to be survivors. So, outside of that, you're going to have a little bit of regionality where you have deer that have, had arrows fly past their head. So they're looking up more than out, stuff like that. But another thing that I find easier about the Midwest is that the deer are larger animals. So they lay down more sign. Rubs in particular and trails are extremely difficult to find where we live because the deer just don't weigh a lot. And I think that makes a difference as far as how much, like what kind of pronounced trails you can see on the ground. And you compare that with, here's another thing we run into a lot. You can find a really great trail in the woods and there's a really good chance that it's hogs where we live. Mm-hmm. So you don't have that in the Midwest, which is actually really nice. I don't get me wrong. I love to shoot them. And they're great eating, but and I put the G on the end of that for you, Mark. But because normally it'd be eating. You go up there and you find a good trail, and you're like, oh, hot dog. This is deer. This is cool. Yeah. But at the same time, man, it's I know there's aspects of it that are more difficult. It's way colder where y'all are at. Like I ain't doing 2 foot of snow and deer. Ain't about that. So I think that it's just fun to go see the differences. I mean, what do you?
For me personally, I like to there, like you said, there's a challenge in leaving home and going somewhere else and learning these new plant types and also even like the cultural dynamics that happen within hunters. Like if you're hunting public land, then you're there is some sort of aspect in the hunt of other hunters affecting your hunt. So I don't want to say like you against other hunters necessarily, but like you have to understand what they're doing, what they like to do. I mean, there's different cultures. There's different times of different seasons where like if a state has like a 3-day gun season, there's a chance that you don't want to be there during those 3 days, because it's going to be just a madhouse. But for us in Texas, we've got a 2-month rifle season. And, basically after opening weekend, it's about the same amount of deer gun pressure from then till January, And so knowing that doesn't hunting in Texas, it doesn't affect my gun season, doesn't affect my plans really. And so there are things like that I do like as a challenge when you go out of state that you have to kind of observe and figure out. And I wouldn't say that the Midwest necessarily hunts necessarily easier, but like KC mentioned, with the sign being easier to see, more pronounced, I think that hunting around here, when you are able to find sign and make your way and spend time out here doing that, then when you go to the Midwest and these deer weigh 220, 250 pounds, they're just making better sign, and it makes things so much more easy. Another thing, lastly, I would say is a lot of the country up in the Midwest, a lot of times, I think lends itself to bow hunting a little bit better because you've got less kind of big woods type atmosphere, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like Casey mentioned, we have all these floodplains and stuff, and it's just so hard to get within 30 yards of a buck a lot of times, or even a deer, period. And so I think a lot of times you've got these little shelter belts, you've got these little sloughs where the farmer couldn't, till. And so you've got these small areas that deer kind of are automatically just funneling through as they move through cover. That kind of helps. So I don't want people to think that we sit here and crack on people in the Midwest for all the time for having hunter.
We don't want you to think that, but we do.
Yeah. No, I'm reading between the lines. Here.
Yeah. No, I will say this though, man, to kind of piggyback on the sign thing that Tyler's talking about. One of the things that can be difficult for us is that we show up in, say, Iowa, which is, I think you drew this year, right? So, and you've hunted there before. Sometimes the sign can be overwhelming because, we are like, oh, man, a scrape, this is awesome where we live. And you go up there, there's a scrape every 10 yards on the fence line, and you have to interpret that stuff and actually make moves to understand that, hey, I need to push in further. I need to go to a different area.
Or how fresh is fresh.
Yes, exactly. So, yes. And is this getting laid down at night versus the daytime, and all these things, these factors that you have to play into. So I do think that there are even some specific challenges in what people think of as the happy hunting ground.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
You bring up something I want to get into, which was if there were, and you kind of alluded to a couple there, I'd love to hear you dive into a little more. What I'm wondering is if there are certain general things that you need, or general modes that you have to switch from when going from the South up to one of these other states in the North or the Midwest. Like, I know when I go from Michigan to Iowa, I'm going from a much higher hunting pressure state to a much lower hunting pressure state. So I always find myself being really paranoid about something in Iowa and then having to remind myself, okay, hold on, chill out. These deer act different than back home. You can get away with this thing or that thing. So I'm constantly needing to put on a different hat when I'm in a certain place, or when I'm going out on a Western whitetail hunt, I got to put on my Western whitetail hunt glasses and look at things differently, because there's just things that are different. Deer will act differently, or they'll react to things differently, or whatever. So my overarching question then is, for someone coming from the South, doing a traveling hunt up to Illinois or Kansas or Iowa or Ohio or whatever, or Michigan, have there been any other things like what you just described that are general rules, like, hey, you got to look at sign different, or hey, you need to realize this? Is there anything else that can be, helpful for people doing that first from south to north trip that they really need to keep in mind and do differently than back home?
Outside of bringing all your clothes, you have to do that for sure. But I think that I would say vocalizations are a huge thing for me, and I understand that I haven't hunted all the states, right? So I don't know anything really about Michigan or Minnesota or whatever. But like in some of the Midwestern states that I've been to, deer vocalizations are a big thing, and it's a thing that you can use. Whereas in Texas, man, rattling works sometimes, and then grunts and snort wheezes, I have had way more bad experiences than good, So I would say kind of up front, that's kind of the thing that I see for sure. I think you got something that you thought of right away too, right?
The first thing I thought of was that if you ever hear anybody use overarching, Mark, it's because of you, just so you know. Like I'm telling you, I hear people say all the time, like, dude, they got that from Mark Kenyon, no doubt.
I got a few of those things, I guess.
Yeah.
You made a shirt like that one time, didn't you? Like all the sayings from the podcast or something?
Yeah, we did. I think that being said was the big one.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. It's funny, dude. No, I mean, to me, like, that's definitely one of them is like getting away with more calling and stuff like that. I would probably say that, like, if I'm leaving and heading north, some of the things I'm thinking about are that there is a much more defined, like Casey alluded to earlier, like dates matter. And so for us, like a couple of years ago, we had a really big buck on public here in Texas that we got pictures of on February 22nd, I believe. And he's like fixing to breed a doe, no doubt. I mean, she's standing like it's about to happen. And so and that's not like something that happens. I mean, it's not like we don't have a rut in February. It's not Alabama or something like that. It's not a weird rut place. But the thing is, we're just such moderate or temperate weather that, there's such a long window of opportunity, and there's yearlings that are coming in, I guess, in February at some point, and that happening. So like when I go up to the Midwest, I think, man, it kind of like, for instance, when I went to Iowa, we went in late October because we saw some weather patterns coming in 2019, and it snowed twice while we were on that trip. It was real slow for much of that trip. It was like a 7 or 8 day trip. And when the snow came in, we just saw it just bust loose, but like that was also October 29th or something like that. So, I think that those dates are a lot more important, I guess. Really when it comes to rut action and stuff like that here in Texas, at least, what determines that more than anything is just when the heat stops, and the deer are comfortable running around more than anything, I feel like a lot of times.
I think something that we've kind of keyed on in the last year really is understanding the pre-rut phase that happens in the Midwest, because you kill a deer on that specific tactic in October last year in Illinois, whereas here where we live, and I don't mean to say that it doesn't happen, but I just have not learned enough to understand that there's anything in front of like a Texas rut outside of just deer doing complete pre-rut stuff. I might not be making sense, but like, for instance, we saw a cold front coming, and you went to Illinois and killed a deer over a scrape on October 23rd, like within the first 2 hours of hunting, right? Like we knew it was going to happen. And in Texas, I just don't think there's...
You knew that was going to happen? Dude, did you really feel like that was going to, like, I'm curious though, because
let me tell you.
Casey's the ultimate optimist.
Oh, always. Yeah, I'm optimistic. So the cold front actually hit here before it hit where Tyler was, because I had to stay here and work. Tyler went up. I had a 9-month-old at the time, so actually I was babysitting. I wasn't working, so I had the kids, so I couldn't go. Tyler went up there and the cold front hit, and I called him at about 12:30. I was like, dude, it's happening. You're going to kill a giant. We love to hype like that. It's fun.
Yeah. I wasn't so sure.
Yeah. Tyler he's a realist, which is probably a good place to be. But you're optimistic.
I'm learning to be.
Yeah, that's right. But so I felt really good about it. And it was all about trail camera data, right? We had actually gone up there in the summer and scouted some and found what we would refer to as a hub scrape, like a place that is perennial and even used in the summertime, like the licking branches getting hit, right? So we knew it was a great place to hung a camera there, followed the trail camera data and kind of tracked, what bucks were around. And, as they moved closer to, having daylight activity, that's kind of when we knew it was time to get going. And then you made the move to go, right?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I liked a lot is that the cold front came in during the day. So it gave me some time it gave me opportunity to walk in daylight for the afternoon hunt, as opposed to walking in the dark and trying to figure out which tree to hang in.
And you chose to, and you got there though ahead of that, right? I mean, if I remember right, you just drove around that morning and chose not to hunt so as not to blindly bust in, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I figured I would just look, kind of finding a plan B as well in case I went in there and messed it up or something. But I was just looking for a couple things I was looking for when I was driving around. Is I was marking different types of ag, so beans, corn, and wheat, and that was what was in that area. And I was just marking that to know to see what deer were feeding and what type of agriculture. And I think at the time I was planning on, if I had to hunt somewhere else, hunting beans as opposed to corn at the time, because the corn hadn't been cut or something like that maybe. But I just drove around because I was like, man, the cold front's coming in about 1 p.m. I think that day. So it'd be better for me to go in with a good wind for one, for my access and everything, even for hunting the scrape, obviously. But and then also that wind is noise cover and stuff like that too. So I'm, I was being aggressive, but at the same time playing a little bit conservative so that, it was working to where like this should work, like all the variables line up if we just do it right here. So let's just be patient and wait half a day.
We call that something
knowledgeably aggressive.
That's what
we've been saying lately, at least.
Yeah. So, and you probably know this too, Mark, and you can probably speak to it some, but like when you go on these out-of-state trips, you have a set schedule, and it's a lot different of a mentality than being, near your home turf and having a season-long hunt, So you have kind of a internal ticker that's always going off and telling you, hey, 3 days, hey, 2.5 hunts, 3 more sits, whatever it might be. So you have to meter that. You have to the way we approach things, and I hate to say we because we're individuals, but our hunting styles fit together really nicely. But we approach things with knowledgeable aggression. So like we make the most aggressive move that we can make sense in our heads. We hardly ever just bust off in there and just see what happens. You know what I mean? It's just not the way we do things. We don't do a lot of observation sits, but like if the wind is completely wrong, we're going to find somewhere else to hunt because we might be able to kill something in a different spot. Or if the wind is just off wind and we can't really get where we want to be, we're going to get as close as we can without, bumping the deer that way, like just in Tyler's situation, right? You just decided to drive around because you knew you could gather intel that would help you maybe the next day, but you knew that evening was going to be an A+ sit. Yeah. So there's no reason to go take a C- sit in the morning when you're going to have an A+ in the evening in the same location.
I think it's important also to note that like when we go out of state, a lot of times we don't have a target deer most of the time. So, if you had a target deer in mind, you'd want to be a lot more conservative than what we're talking about probably right now, and I think that as well as anybody because you've hunted definitely lots of targets over the years, which is cool. And I'm sure you're also a little bit irritated at times too.
There's pros and cons.
Yeah.
So that Illinois hunt, that was public land, right?
Yes, sir.
So my question then is, how did hunting pressure factor into this at all? Like, why was that huge 8-pointer in there. And there was another nice buck, I think, that came in sort of the same time when you had that buck in underneath you. And there was some other little buck that came and hit that scrape, and you had trail camera videos of this big wide buck. Why was this spot such a honey hole? Why weren't there other people in there doing the same darn thing you were trying to do?
I can make some hypothesis as to why. I don't know for sure because this is the first year we hunted that place. I think for one, KC is built like a hog a little bit. And so to clarify, he does not mind going through brush and just getting ticks on him and stuff like that. Like he'll just bust through anything,
So you just put him out front and then just follow behind him? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
I pull back, Todd's running back.
That's it. Yeah. And so he just eats spider webs and stuff. And
I need someone like you.
Yes. Yeah, you do, for sure. He's awesome. But anyway, we were going through kind of just making this pass, on this property and kind of really skirting a big ag field that ended up being a cut wheat field in the summer. So it was kind of like not a whole lot of benefit at the time, but we were in there. So we were finding some rubs and stuff. Well, he finds this scrape and we realized that it's being used, and I think that this scrape was in a spot that, KC found because he's a fullback, and dudes just don't want to go busting through brush and that kind of thing. So I think that there's an aspect that this scrape hadn't really been found by anybody yet. And it's also set in kind of a, I don't know. The spot wasn't like, when you look at maps of this place, it's a lot of acreage, and I don't think that you would pick this spot out of all the spots that you would find on this, because it's just not, it's mostly ag fields. It's kind of an out of the way little strip in between ag fields. And, it's far enough in as well. There's a little bit of elevation, at least for us, maybe not for other people, but you're kind of walking up and down a little bit in kind of some ridges and hills and stuff. And it's about 650 yards, I think, is what I measured it straight line, So it's getting close to that half-mile distance. And for a lot of guys, man, when you're talking about, early season, kind of warm, I don't think they're wanting to walk in too far and get after it too hard until the rut a lot of times. So I don't know. Maybe those are some of the factors that led to nobody having discovered this yet.
There's something else that I know you've mentioned in the past, is that you had the flexibility to actually head up there and do this hunt on a weekday.
Yeah.
Whereas, especially in October, guys are using their rutcation dates in November. The only opportunity they have to really go in October is on weekends. So you shot this deer on a Friday.
Thursday.
I
shot him on a Thursday, and I drove around the next day on Friday because I had a buddy that was up there hunting with me. And I was just driving, looking fields for him, and there was a lot more people Friday afternoon than there was, when I hunted on Thursday. So definitely was a difference, Yeah,
that's a great point. So what about another example for you, Casey? You were hunting a public land buck, and I think it was Kansas. Is that where you killed your big buck last year?
Is that a good question, Mark?
Or maybe it's purposeful that you didn't label it. So if you don't want to tell me, you don't have to.
No, it was Kansas. Yeah, okay. That was in Kansas.
It looked like a Kansas type of hunt. So you were hiking in there, and you were saying that you're heading to this spot that looked good or something, and then you'd pass some ladder stands on your way in, and the sign was actually getting worse, but for some reason you picked out this spot. And you ended up having this great big old tight, tall, 10-point giant come in, yada, 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 and you killed him. Awesome. Why was he in there? Why weren't other hunters in that spot mucking that thing up? Why did that work out from a hunting pressure standpoint?
That's a good question, and I don't say that sarcastically. I mean that. It sounds like you watched that video, so thanks for watching, man. But that was the only deer I saw on that whole hunt. So I'd seen a possum about 4:30, and that was the play that kept me in it. So it was tough. And the whole time, Mr. Optimist is even second guessing himself. Like, is this the right deal? But I would tell you the reason and this is counterintuitive to the advice I would give on a normal basis. So I guess you have to kind of interpret this how you will. But I looked at the map and got a broader picture. And I knew by the way deer act in that area is kind of Western Midwest stuff, is that, food sources are everything because it's arid, right? So winter wheat, they live and die by it out there, right? So I knew being close to that winter wheat is going to be more important because I killed that deer on November 23rd, okay, which is still definitely within the month of November. So deer are rutting, and even on beyond that, I think that, rut dates matter, but if bucks are anything like people, they have things on their mind a lot of times, so, but at the same time, I had to interpret the situation. What matters more, this sign that I'm seeing or that food source that's over there? And I think that what was going on is that that buck was cruising for late estrus does. And all the sign I was seeing on the way in was rut sign. And that's all well and good if it's November 8th and they're just in there raging. But that deer is cruising for late November does. And those does are by all means going to that winter wheat at that point. That is where they're going to live. They're going to go over there and eat. Now, I didn't see any that evening, but I couldn't see all the, I'm on public and you just can't see all the ag field, right? But I think that's what he was doing. I think that he was cruising up and down the thicker habitat, waiting or trying to smell a late estrus doe. And in that moment, I made a decision that helped me inevitably kill that buck. Was it the right decision 10 times out of 10? Maybe not, but it did work out that time. I think that it's funny. You hear a lot of people talk about making good choices and making right decisions, and even those guys are only making the right choice 2% of the time.
Right.
And most of us will do good to bat barely a 0.1% or whatever it might be. So but in that scenario, I think what really helped was to, instead of zoom in and try to find specific trails, which I did that as well. I found if you watch that video where the deer ends up jumping the fence onto private, that was the trail that I had seen on the map and decided that would be a good place to set up because it was kind of in a corner of a winter wheat field. But on the broader picture, it was the idea of where was the best food within a couple square miles, and that's where it was. So I think that was kind of what led to that deal.
It was a heck of a buck. That certainly
Thanks,
was.
It's
awesome.
my biggest buck ever, and I love it because I don't have a lot of mounts. That's actually the first deer I've ever shoulder mounted, and I'm really happy with it. It's just beautiful to be able to have something like that to hang in your house. And I've got a 1.5 old, and we sit in the recliner and we'll be rocking or whatever, and he'll point up and go, D, looking at my deer. No, it's just the coolest thing. I know you're a fellow. You kind of understand, man. It's awesome.
Yes, that's the best.
Yeah.
So I want to pose something, and I want to make sure you guys both know this is a safe space. All right, you're in the trust tree.
I like it.
And any answers to these questions cannot be used against you. Okay, so whatever you're about to tell me cannot be used against you or held against you in any way. All right, you both understand?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
we
sir.
are with you.
Okay, so we'll give. I'm gonna throw the fullback under the bus first. So Casey, you're up first.
Okay. All right, let's go. The bus is gonna have a big bump.
If there was one thing that Tyler could do to be a better deer hunter, like if you could change one thing, like right now, tell him you got to do this different, or you got to do this better, or you got to fix this thing you keep screwing up.
Okay.
What's that one thing it would be that you would tell Tyler?
You sure this is a trust tree?
And be detailed. Be detailed.
Yeah, man, you might have should have prefaced me a little bit on this because we might have already ironed all this out. We've been hunting together like 4 or 5 years. So, no, but I can think about it. So Tyler is a very pensive person. He spends a lot of time thinking about things. And this is why we hunt together well. I don't. I am a go with your gut, make observation. I process things very fast. That's not always a good thing, though. But this is about Tyler. It's not about me. We're not talking about my faults. Tyler sometimes will get a little bogged down in a decision when and this isn't often, right? But that is something that can affect his hunt. And I think you'd probably agree. Sometimes it's time to just be an Indian and make some choices and go after it, which sounds very cliche, but there are times like that. Like you just have to live and die by the situation, And I would say that Tyler has worked on that and is really good at it now, but that's still something that you struggle with. He's nodding his head. He's just trying to think about something mean to say about me now.
All right, yeah. So now let's flip it around.
How do you feel about my description?
I think it's hilarious because the first thing I was thinking is KC settles sometimes with a spot, and it worked out in Kansas. You know what I mean? But like, I will stand. So I actually killed a buck. I haven't released the video yet, but I killed a buck on public in Kansas as well this past year, and I walked past a bunch of good sign and then walked back to it. Maybe I learned something from KC's hunt. I don't know, because I killed this deer late, and
in the season, not in the day.
Yeah, late in the season. Yeah, and so I walked past this spot and got in there and started thinking, and the wind wasn't like I wanted it, and like so many things. I'm just analyzing everything. And I'm thinking, and like if a camera dude was with me at the time, he would have been thinking I was crazy. I'm just sitting there staring at the ground, pretty much thinking,
I can relate to this.
Yes, I know. I listen to your podcast a lot.
Mark, so we've been listeners of you for a long time. You've had a podcast for a long time, and you have a great product. And we've kind of drawn some similarities in your personality and Tyler's personalities. Y'all are a lot alike, I think. You really are.
So it sounds like you're doing some good stuff, Tyler. I really like what you're describing here.
Yeah, you do. You think KC's terrible?
No. We are assuming you're going to ask him the same question, right?
So I would say, like, me, I'm sitting there thinking. I finally go back to the better sign that I saw. I knew that looking on the map that there was a creek crossing there or whatever. So I put all this stuff together, I think about it, and a lot of times I'll get to the spot and I'll spend another 20 minutes thinking about which tree I need to be in, and KC's just like, let's do this, and like he said, like, I think that balances me out pretty well when we're hunting together, both of those characteristics. So like, it was just hilarious because the first thing I thought before he ever answered was that sometimes he is just like, oh yeah, this is going to work. We're going to kill something here.
You thought the inverse of what I said, which is funny because I feel like Tyler's never the guy who would like leave home without his bow, and that is 100% me. Last year, was it 2 years ago? I don't remember. 1 year, I was glassing a place. We were in separate areas, and I got out. I thought I was going to make a stalk on a deer, decided not to, got back in the truck, put it in reverse, and then saw my bow in the reverse camera. I was about to run it over, right? And that's just, Tyler would never be moving fast enough for that to happen, So that's the difference in us. And I think that honestly, man, like there is a very much a loner mentality or a lifestyle or mantra that people have in whitetail hunting specifically. And I think that, not that some people don't function well, and I'm not criticizing them, but I don't want to understate the importance that I feel of having a quality hunting partner, not just buddy, but just somebody that you really can rely on, and that kind of helps you make better decisions and helps you go on hunts, and just somebody to really deep dive in a thought process with, like that's just, it's been invaluable for Tyler and I is like we've, become closer and better friends and hunting partners that we can just bounce these ideas off of each other. And I can't tell you how many times I was like, oh man, look at this spot on the map, at like 11 p.m. or whatever, we're laying in bed. And Tyler's like, yeah, but what about how are you going to access it? And I'm like, oh, that's right. Yeah, there's like really hardly any way to get there, Yeah. But I really see a lot of value in that for sure.
Yeah.
So I got to be fair and give you a chance to send a blow my way. You've heard the Wired Hunt podcast over the years. You've maybe heard me discuss what I do and how I do things enough times that something has stood out to you where you said, Mark, have you ever screamed at the radio and said, just stop doing that or do this? Is there anything that you need to get off your chest now? This is your chance.
We both get to go, right?
Oh, yeah. You can both, if there's that many.
Man, you seem like a Santa guy, and I don't want to just toot your horn for you or anything. But I would say I have a funny one and then actually a hunting one as well.
Okay.
So if it's safe space, right?
Safe space, yes.
I think as Texans, when you say balance and challenge, I'm like, what? Or egg. I got to tell you the story. You might know this guy. He works with you. Yeah. So Garrett Long.
Yeah.
We know a lot of Garretts. Garrett Long. We were out to eat supper with him one time, and he was talking about egg fields, and I literally had no idea what he's talking about. And it's, ag, like with an A,
Yeah.
But I had the blankest look on my face, and Tyler saw me and had to tell me he's talking about, like agriculture. But
do we really sound like that?
I overemphasized it for sure.
Ag fields.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Good
job.
And
I'm gonna keep working on that.
You need to be you.
Yeah,
but,
for sure.
But it's just funny as a Southerner, like it sticks out. Balance for sure. But and I think you've addressed this too, man, and I appreciate that. But I think that you've struggled with pre-shot buck fever some. Yeah, and I think, and I don't know because I haven't hunted with you, but I think that you've kind of addressed that. But I think you'd recognize that that's a problem you've had too. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely something I struggle with and had my moments, and work in progress still, right? I mean, always.
Yeah, and it's cool to get excited, man. That's not it's not a bad thing by any means,
Sure.
It just, you got to make sure it doesn't impede you and your goal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. What's next?
Do I have to say one?
No, you don't have to. But if something came to mind, you could.
At the same time, to throw me under the bus this way too. Like, actually, you're the only one to be mean to Mark.
Yeah. I was just wondering if I had to say one because there's a lot of them. But
yeah, you can set it out, or we can just move on.
Yeah, let's move on, man.
All
I mean, I think you. Okay, Casey's gonna. All right, here we go. I would say, kind of in the same boat as me. Sometimes what Casey thought about me, at least, is the analysis paralysis thought. Just sometimes, just like, you obviously this stuff is such a passion for you, man, and you've been doing it for so long. You just, you want to make big decisions and make them right, and sometimes that's a tough thing to do, man, because there's so many variables, and you have time. It's not like, like in a football game, you just kind of like either you throw it or you don't, and it's either picked off or it gets caught for a touchdown or it's incomplete, So it's a little different with deer hunting. You make most of the time until the buck's right in front of you, you're making decisions that you kind of have some time to make,
I wonder if it would be. This is the only a weird nerd like me would ever think of this, but I wonder if you put like a self-imposed time restriction on your decisions. So if like every time I got to spot, I'm like, all right, I got to pick a tree, and I might sit there and do what you're talking about, Tyler, and like debate back and forth this and that. I need to just have like an app ready to go on my phone at all times. Okay, decision time, and I hit that button. I've got 5 minutes, and I have to make a decision in those 5 minutes. I wonder if that would help.
The issue would be once you get into your tree, you sit there for hours thinking about how dumb you are for making that decision.
Very, very true. A lot of self-loathing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But Mark, I do think that after we're mean to you, it's probably good for us to be nice to you. I think what's cool is that, like, even through your your media outlets that you have, we have seen the growth and the change.
Yeah.
You've taken steps and done things to address things that you've had a hard time with. And I think that all of us, self-evaluation is huge, man. Like, as a hunter, you have to be able to self-evaluate. You have to be able to not just leave a hunt and say, well, I didn't get one. You need,
why is the question?
Yes, why? And this is all relative, right? Like, if your goal is to go out and just have an opportunity to go hunting, then maybe you don't need to do that. But if your goal is to go out and become a better hunter, then I think that, for sure, you need to be able to self-evaluate and not be too proud to know your own flaws.
Yeah. Another thing that I like about you, Mark, is, and I'm really just I'm appreciative of what you do and that you have a big voice, because I think that you're very solidly in the middle, like understanding of different mentalities and different thoughts and different ways of hunting, and obviously a proponent of conservation, man, and just, getting people involved, speaking to the experts and speaking to the guys who also, are new to this. But I really appreciate and am glad that you have a big voice, because you do a really good job, man.
Yeah, I do appreciate you guys saying that, and I didn't pay him to say this, guys. Everyone else listening, this wasn't pre-planned.
But you can.
Yeah,
you can.
I could.
We have PayPal.
If you take a sound clip, bring
that's
the bad
funny.
with the good. Don't just make it.
And on that note, it is time to wrap it up. So where can people go to see all the stuff you guys are doing? It's good stuff. I've enjoyed it, and I'm glad we've got to have this conversation. So everyone that's listened to this and enjoyed it is going to want to go see these big giant bucks that you're finding out there and secretly chasing down in secret states. So where can they find it?
Yeah, sure, man. So our podcast is the Element Podcast, and that's kind of similar to a lot of podcasts where you have a weekly show, and then we have some special things we do that are more intensive when it comes to like map scouting, or we do a fall series called Big Buck Breakdowns, where we do hunting story type stuff. But
hopefully you'll be on that this year,
yeah,
man.
dude.
If you shoot a big buck, we'll have you on.
Sign me up.
Yeah, and then we have the social media outlets that everyone hates to love, like Facebook, Instagram, all that is theelementwild.com. Funny enough, the element was taken, so we had to add the wild in there.
Yeah.
And then
the website.
Yeah, theelementwild.com is our, or you're at the Element Wild. I guess I got that mixed up. Yeah, sorry.
It's all unfortunately the Element Wild, because we don't have $20,000 to spend on the element.com, So
yeah, and then our YouTube channel, Tyler is actually our master YouTube expert. He's a great video editor and does a really good job on that. So if you just search the Element or the Element Hunting on YouTube, you'll be able to find all the hunts that we've discussed today and some others as well. I would advise not going back too far, because it gets real weird.
I feel the same way with my old stuff too.
Yeah, for sure, man. For sure.
Oh, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys for taking the time to chat. This has been fun, and definitely want to circle back with you after the season or mid-season or something and see how all this is going for you.
Sure.
Absolutely, Mark. Sounds great, man. I hope you have a great deer season, dude.
Appreciate it. Right back at you. All right, and that's a wrap for us today. Definitely check out what these guys are doing on YouTube. Check out their podcast. It's all good stuff. Lots to learn from. So until next time, appreciate you listening. Best of luck if you've got a hunting trip coming on up. If you're heading out to go chase western critters, or have an early season, late August or early September opener for whitetails, shoot straight, have fun. It's here. The good stuff has arrived. The 2021 whitetail season is kicking off, and I couldn't be more excited. So good luck out there. Have fun. And until next time, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store, or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.